What is going on, everyone, and welcome back to another Sports Talk on Tap podcast. We're here. You can find daily videos Monday through Friday covering all the four major sports leagues, whether that be MLB, NHL, NFL, or NBA, games, highlights, news, all that fun stuff. And in today's NBA episode, also, happy Monday to everyone. Week's underway. Despite Nick still being on vacation, we're still doing content for you guys. So in today's episode, figured we start off with something interesting, mainly because I watched it on another basketball episode. Shout out the Pick a Side if anyone watches them. They're really cool. They were just doing a debate on kind of, who's the biggest threat to the Celtics. And there was kind of like two teams that they were solely focused in on. And I think mainly, Nick, for us, it'll probably be three teams that might have, the best chance to beat the Celtics in the East. Because obviously, the Celtics, 64 wins, only lost like 3 games in their championship run. So it was very much clear-cut that they were the best team. But, with that being said, we haven't had a repeat NBA champion in a couple of years now. We've started to get a little more continuity since the Warriors dynasty has ended. So it's becoming pretty clear now, there's a lot more, different difficulty in this league to go back. But what teams would be most likely to knock off this team, if they were to run into some trouble? And also, shout out Sam Housh on the graphic, got a little nice extension over the weekend. So he's staying put. But yeah, Nick, I'll let you answer this first from a Celtics fan perspective.
I think after free agency, the team that's really emerged the most is probably the Knicks, just with that Mikal Bridges pickup. And, I don't think many teams in the East made any splash moves that really said, they're coming for Boston, other than the Knicks. I think with that big trade where they sent all those draft picks over to Brooklyn, that really shows they're going all in on this team. So I think that's the threat, the only real threat out of the East. Maybe you could say Indiana, just because in the playoffs, other than Dallas, Indiana really seemed to be the team that gave the Celtics the most trouble, just because they're
Indiana could still score.
Exactly. Yeah. They can match the Celtics scoring pretty well. Like you said, they were what were they, second or third in offensive rating in
I think NBA second in NBA history, and I think they led the league in points per game. So they had the best points per game out of any team ever, which is crazy to think about. But.
Right. So I think I would put Knicks 1. It's hard for me to put Pacers at 2, but I might, just because of how I've seen them play the Celtics. I would say they are a threat to the Celtics specifically. I think other teams might beat Indiana a little more handily, just because maybe those other teams can, counter Indiana better than the Celtics. Now, I'm saying that as the Celtics swept them in the Eastern Conference Finals, but I know
it was sweet. I know what you mean, though. Indiana just showed their youth in that playoff series, making dumb mistakes late, because if they just had that's why I was really surprised, more so just because they did add Pascal, who is a champion winner. He knows what it takes, and it wasn't necessarily his fault, but a guy like Tyrese, as he matures, just that game one, crazy ending. If they mature as a team, they realistically, if they didn't choke those games, it could have been easily 2-2, 3-1 Indiana. But at the end of the day, Boston showed their experience. So yeah, I don't mind that. So you have New York 1, Indiana 2.
Yeah, and maybe Cleveland at 3, or Orlando. Orlando could be a sneaky one, because we saw them give the Celtics troubles a few years ago when Orlando was bad. So if that team's done nothing but get better.
Those are very interesting. Okay, I have kind of a completely different list.
Okay, well, let's hear your list. Let's hear yours.
Well, so I'm very curious, will you agree, disagree with here? And I don't think any of your teams necessarily are bad, because Indiana did show that they were really up for the challenge. Obviously, when I look at overall, I think the Knicks are still probably, they're the best equipped to defend Boston. Obviously, when you have Mikal an OG to put on Tatum Brown. That's the best you're going to get. My question for if that was to be a hypothetical series is who would do the secondary scoring? Because Jalen Brunson, as great of a scoring option as he is, Drew Holiday and Derek White is kind of like a nightmare matchup just because they're throwing different bodies at him and they know what it takes to defend at a high level. So DiVincenzo, if Julius Randle is he healthy, and we know what Julius Randle has been in the playoffs so far. So he would be an X factor, but would he be a good X factor or bringing the Knicks down? That would be one to look out for. Guys like Josh Hart. Can OG and Mikal score the ball, but they're probably going to throw Jaylen Brown on Mikal, and we saw what Jaylen Brown did on his defense with Luka throughout the whole playoffs. So my worry is with the Knicks would just be that secondary scoring, but I still feel like they have enough guys with DiVincenzo that can hit three ball really well, Josh Hart. Mikal's a tough bucket getter, even though Jaylen Brown on him. But I still trust the Knicks the best probably, just because they're the most equipped defensively. And if they can just get some offense from Julius Randle and stuff to keep up, I think that could work out very well. So I did agree with you on that front. But my number 2 is probably going to be the Milwaukee Bucks. I know they're a little bit older again, but when I look at them, I think even last year when they were looked a little funky, it's always good games between the Celtics and Bucks. And I think the Bucks even blew them out the 2 games they won. So it's always good games. And I think Milwaukee just matches up really well just because Giannis is such a mismatch in that series, because as good as, Al Horford is, and, as good as, actually trying to defend Giannis he is, Giannis still gets his pretty easily, or, not easily, but still gets his 30 points and, 12 rebounds. And you still have, Dame, who could probably hit some tough shots. And I liked their under the radar moves they made over the weekend, late last week that we didn't talk about, which was, signing Gary Trent Jr., who's a 45% 3-point shooter on catch and shoot, just adding more spacing around him. We saw probably one of the lone bright spots in that Pacer series for the Bucks was Chris Middleton. If he's healthy, can still make a lot of tough shots. And that's just kind of what he does. And he's always been a thorn in the Celtics side, it feels like. But, I still trust them probably. And, Bobby Portis coming off the bench. I don't think they're as deep as the Celtics, but some of the mismatches that they have, I think could, be beneficial. And, adding some just Gary Trent is a passable defender, and just kind of adding passable defenders that aren't cones like Malik Beasley out there, I think will just help their defense improve. And then Gary's in a full offseason, what Doc Rivers does to use Giannis defensively, who's still a top 3 defensive player in this world, just given all that he can do. So I would put the Bucks at number 2 just because it's just always been a tough matchup for the Celtics, always a good 7-game series going either way. But yeah, I'd probably go Bucks number 2. That's kind of where I think the big first one, we probably have a disagreement on.
Okay. It might have just been sort of my recency, if you want to call it bias, but just what I've seen in recent times. It's just because of really this year's playoffs. Maybe I put aside the Bucks a little bit. I do still think they're a team. I didn't put the 76ers on this list, period. I just don't think I will never pick Philadelphia in a matchup against the Celtics. And I get, Embiid can be the MVP, best player in the world. I just don't think
that's going to be our second disagreement, I'd say.
Okay. Well, I'll agree with you on the Bucks one. The Bucks are a team I kind of overlooked when thinking about it, but when the Bucks are going good and Giannis is playing the best player in the world, he gives the Celtics fits. And he even did this year in the regular season, like you said, when they were beating the Celtics by 30 or 40. So I would say I probably should have put them on there. They were probably a team I slipped my mind.
No,
but
you're good.
I still
I think that's just a huge mismatch that they can exploit.
Right. I think the Celtics, obviously Giannis is he's going to be the best player on the court in that series. But I just think the Celtics' other scorers can beat Milwaukee's other scorers, if that makes sense. Like, I think,
Yeah,
obviously Dame's going to get his, but I just trust guys like Jaylen Brown, Derek White, even really Al Horford, or if Porzingis is healthy and he's playing, I trust him to, get his points. And I just feel like they would match up well in that case. Because you can't really, there's nobody in the league, I think, that can really defend Giannis and shut him down. You're not
I
really
would
going to.
say, yeah, and I'd say for Boston, they can do a lot of everything, but for Milwaukee, their goal would just be to outscore them, just kind of,
Right, right,
hope they miss, but they do have the offense, obviously. Dame would probably, struggle a little bit, but he still finds a way to,
right.
score.
Mhm.
Giannis is obviously the biggest mismatch in that series. Brook Lopez, as much as he regressed last season, he can still stretch the floor.
Mhm.
Same with Bobby Portis coming off the bench. And just snipe shooters like Pat Connaughton, Gary Trent Jr., that will help just space the floor to help try and keep up on offense. That's why I probably think it's their toughest matchup, second toughest matchup, I'd say.
Mhm.
And then to close out the top three, team that you didn't include on your top five, um, the Philadelphia 76ers. And the reason why I put them there is because hypothetically they should be a tough matchup for Boston, just because different kind of play styles, but both similar, very skilled big men. Giannis and Embiid, being able to take advantage of Boston's not so great interior. But Embiid has just never been able to do that. Al Horford has just kind of, been able to lock him up. I'm curious how the Kristaps matchup would look when he was out there, because Embiid does have a lot of weight on hit Kristaps, so maybe he could use that. But even then, even when Embiid hasn't shown up, the series has always gotten 7 games. Philadelphia last time led 3-2 with a chance to close it out. And it's just because of the other guys. Obviously, that was James Harden have some couple on games and off games, but Tyrese Maxey has kind of taken over that role. And I think he's the definition of a guy that could score 240 balls in that series to help. And that's what he did with in the next series, just to help the 76ers prevail in some of those games. So I think Tyrese Maxey, a cold-blooded killer, adding Paul George to that lineup gives you even more spacing, more shooting. And he's not the same defender as he was, back in Indiana or even OKC, but he's still pretty darn solid. So you got to give credit where credit's due there. And just kind of, I think they have the right depth, like, even though he's like a dinosaur now, Kyle Lowry always kind of just finds a way to get into the Celtics' heads. Whenever I've watched, back in the Raptors Celtics series for a little bit, he's just always been kind of a thorn in their side as well. And he's a thorn in most people's sides, to be fair, just
Mhm.
because he's a menace. But realistically, I think this team has the ability, and Kelly Oubre is a really solid player. They added, Caleb Martin, who can provide some more shooting to that team. And overall, Eric Gordon as well. So they got a lot of like veteran minimum guys that can help just win now, get some spacing out there, and just kind of help Embiid. If Jerry McCain, who's also known to be a 3-point shooter, playmaker, if he can, be something, this team has some decent amount of depth that they didn't have last year. And if pending health, of course, but if they stay healthy, they have a big 3 on offense to match the firepower. So I would say best chance wise, I would still take them because, I mean, like I said, even in that, 2020 to 23 series, as much as shit Embiid got for sucking in some of those games, and rightfully so, because he didn't show up when it mattered most. It was still a 7-game series, and Philly was on the verge of winning in 6 games before Tatum hit some big shots down the stretch. So, I would say just adding Paul George too did enough for me to probably make them top 3, just given matchups. There would definitely be some question marks on the interior or on the exterior, like defense, but you do add Paul George, who's solid. Tyrese Maxey at least tries. It's pretty much all you can ask for. And that's probably, you could probably put him like on a, Derek White, a guy that's just going to space and shoot. You still have Joel Embiid up front, who's still a really solid interior defender himself. So I think When looking at the top three, that would probably be the team I'd want to round it out with, because a team like Cleveland or Orlando, I need to see more offense from other guys before I really even give them a chance in that series. Because maybe Cleveland matches up with them, second best like defensively with Mobley and his versatility on someone like Tatum. But at the end of the day, if Mobley doesn't have his jumper, we don't know what Garland's up to. If he was getting traded, but even if he doesn't, Garland hasn't proved anything to be a playoff performer. So outside of Donovan Mitchell, they realistically don't have the offense to keep up with Boston in a 7-game series. So I think these were the top three teams for me, wise, that I feel like match up with Boston the best chance to bring them down in 7.
Okay. I'm just going to make a little formal apology. My mind must still be in a little bit of a vacation mode, because I did say nobody in the East really stacked up. And obviously the Sixers got Paul George, so that's my mistake. But I'm still going to leave them out, just because I just think the Sixers have way too many up and down players, where we saw it with, obviously James Harden's not with them, but we saw it with him where he dropped like 40 in game 5 and then just disappeared for the rest of the series and they lost. And I just think Paul George is somebody who kind of does the same thing, where he has a big game and then he'll shoot like 5 for 18 and potentially lose them the game.
Yeah, but we've seen that, and I do agree. But at the end of the day, you need some big games to beat this team. So if they could just
right. If everybody has one big game, that's all it takes.
Yeah. If they could flip the switch, like Paul George, instead of 2 to 3 games, has 4 really good games to help boost them win, and 3 stinkers, or not even stinkers.
If Paul George has 2 good games, Embiid has 2 good games, and Tyrese Maxey has 2 good games, those are 6 games where at least one of your top scorers has a really good game. I like those odds when it comes to winning a series.
Yeah. So, but we'll see, because Joel Embiid's proven that he needs to be more consistent as well. He just came off his best playoff series, to his credit, against the Knicks, but we'll see, because health is probably the biggest issue and why I put them at 3, because realistically, I think they have more offensive firepower to match them than the Bucks, but I just can't trust them health-wise. So, that'll be something interesting we see as we go along. But yeah, overall, very, we had kind of different lists, but that's what makes this fun. I respect leaving Philly out. They got to prove it to you before they can believe in it. And I think one team you mentioned, Orlando, is very intriguing. They obviously have a lot of great defenders like Jalen Suggs, Paulo, adding KCP that could give Boston fits. But similar to Cleveland, I'm curious just where the scoring can come from in a 7-game series to match up with that. But they probably top 3 team in the East that matches up with them the best defensively, along with probably the Knicks still one, just because those 2 wing defenders are unreal. But should be very interesting. Obviously seeing how the Celtics look against these teams in the regular season and kind of, heading into the playoffs, because we probably will see one of these matchups. So I'm very curious and excited to see how it will go down if it happens. With that being said, as always, make sure to like and subscribe if you enjoy this kind of content, and let us know in the comments who you guys think, are the best teams that could give Boston a run for their money next season in the Eastern Conference, or is Boston just doomed to come back out of the East without any problems? Let us know in the comments. We'll catch you in the next one. Peace.